This is Jordan Edwards, and this is the Business Jiu-Jitsu Podcast.
All right. I'm here with Mike Constantiner. Mike, let me give a little intro on who you are and how we know each other. So Mike is a real live entrepreneur, an angel investor to the core. You have had successful startups and exits. You've had success without not necessarily being a huge monetary success, but from what I remember from our conversations, you've had startups that you've been very proud of that didn't, achieve that exit status, like Cameo, your first and your app that was ultimately sold to Vimeo. Yeah. You currently have a startup right now called Dads, which I am a user of.
Sick.
And enjoying very much.
Great.
We had a meeting through a very good friend of mine, an investing partner, Ben Zeises. Ben is an angel investor himself, and Ben and I have had a lot of success together investing early in our careers in real estate, but now in the midpoint of our careers in all kinds of prop tech and angel investments, and I've been kind of along for the ride with him. Those are his investments that I've participated in, and I've really, really enjoyed that. And that's something that you have a lot of experience in. So we have a lot to talk about. Most importantly, jiu-jitsu. That's the jiu-jitsu podcast. But before we even dig into your background and who you are, it occurred to me as I was thinking about what to talk about today that we met in January, and when we went out for coffee that day, there was no way we could have known that in just a few short weeks after that, in less than 2 months, the whole world would be turned on its head. And when we did meet for coffee that day, it was so procedural, like any other business meeting or friend meeting you take, and you go get coffee with someone, and that just doesn't exist right now.
It's weird, man. I was like, and I was thinking about it too. It's like, I live in, temporary, like in a semi-permanent situation where I might end up staying here in California. But, we were like, we have to train together. And I was recovering from my knee surgery and I was just getting back into training. And, it's like, and then, COVID hit and it's like, and I was just thinking, it's like, I don't know when I'm going to be back in New York. I don't know when, it's like at this point, it's like, when are we going to get to train together? Right. Like, and it was just one of those things that, in January, if you had said that in our first meeting, it was like, what kind of craziness is that?
It goes to show you never to take a single day for granted, and you just never know what's going to happen. And that is so core to being an entrepreneur, of course, going on these wild rides, taking these crazy leaps of faith and working so hard. But I just thought that was something that was, I didn't know when it was. I went back to my phone to when we went out. It was in early January this year. And it's just the whole world is so different.
Oh, it's so wild. Like I remember very specifically, like my last meeting, right, with catching up with a buddy. And it was the week of March 8th. And that was the week that COVID really started to get serious. And we were going to meet for a drink. And I was waiting for him in this bar. And I just felt uncomfortable, right? Because it was already I'm kind of looking at people and I'm thinking about this coronavirus. And he comes in and I'm like, you know what, man, maybe we should just go for a walk. I don't really need a beer right now. And we ended up walking around. It was it was great, it was a beautiful evening in New York. But, you just it's that was the last time I've done that, and it's been 6.5 months, and it's so crazy.
Have you gotten back to any kind of training?
Dude, zero. Well, no, because like I said, I'm now in California and it was really unexpected. So March 12th, we had a trip planned to see my in-laws here in California, which we were like, look, let's just go. It was risky. We were nervous because my wife was halfway through her second pregnancy. And we were obviously very nervous, but we're like, look, let's just get to California. And the 2-week trip might turn into a month trip, but that's okay. I can work from anywhere and she could take the time off. So we get out here and then things just get worse and worse. And because my wife was pregnant, we just, we kind of were setting these deadlines that we kept pushing back on. Okay, well, like we have to really make the decision if we're going back to New York or not, by this date. And really, given that the baby was due at the end of, towards the end of July, we really, June 1st was our cutoff date. And at that point, there was no good sign for us to go back to New York. So we've been stuck here. Now we actually rented a house for a year. But just really because of now the second baby, I don't really have time to start training, but we do have a nanny starting next week. Nice. And AOJ is about a 10-minute walk from our new house. Oh, and so nice. My plan is definitely to, whenever I used to come out here, I would mainly train at AOJ when I was out here. I'd also do a few of the 10th Planet. They have a couple locations here. Do that, which is a really cool experience. Nice. But I figured while I'm here.
For the more business-minded followers, that's the Art of Jiu-Jitsu, run by the Mendez brothers, two of the best competitors of all time, and probably one of the most the coolest aesthetic of any gym. And they also have an amazing partnership with Show Your Roll, a clothing brand, and Ruka, and they just put out some great stuff.
I think they're doing it on their own now. I don't think it's with Ruka anymore. So those guys are real businessmen as well. They're pretty amazing what they've built. But so I don't know. It's the training there is amazing. I'm 37 years old and very much a hobbyist. That I love jiu-jitsu, and you go in and you've got these 15-year-olds, and they're I don't even know what color belt they are. They just run circles around you, and you're just what the fuck is going on? I'm just what is going on here, right? It's a cool environment, and I love the Mendez brothers style of jiu-jitsu, right? And in my mind, I'm oh, that's how I train, right? And then you actually go try it, and then you're okay, I'm zero like that, but it'll be nice to see. We'll see how it goes. But I'm excited to get back into it. It's actually been in a week or two. It'll be a year since I tore my meniscus. So I really have only trained about 2 weeks in the past year. Like I said, I was just getting back into it mid to late February. And then COVID, so.
Yeah. Oof. All right. So we'll take a little rewind on that. Good. It's a good intro to let the people know who you are. But this book that I'm writing, so this podcast is research for a book that I'm writing. I mentioned it to you when we met with the idea of business jiu-jitsu. And the whole concept of this book is that the principles that govern business and jiu-jitsu and life are the same on and off the mat. And the lessons that we learn on the mat are so applicable to what we do in business. And you started a company called Principles, which I think is interesting because it's at the core of what I'm trying to get at with this project. And when we discuss, we really connect on this, that the principles that govern life and business and jiu-jitsu are so deeply connected. What led you to start a company called Principles?
Well, so really, I guess the story was originally, so I grew up skating, and was really influenced by the brands in the skate world, right? And the kind of the lifestyle, not just the act of skating, but the clothes and kind of this thing that it represented who I was and the things that I was into. The original idea for Principles was I wanted to kind of create personal care products for imagine if a skate brand, right, created toothpaste and soap, et cetera, with the idea being let's get young, men, boys, whatever, teenagers, college-age kids to start thinking about personal care at a younger age through fun products, right, and packaging the bars of soap or packaging, the toothpaste, et cetera, in a way that would be the same as if Element or, Birdhouse, throwing back to some older brands, right, did those products. I actually paired up with a co-founder. She was my favorite clothing designer at the time. And she was kind of figuring out what her next move was. And we started talking about the idea, and really she brought all the talent when it came to the creative. And the way she came up with the name Principles actually was she was researching jiu-jitsu and found some, on Google, some manual that said, it was a manual on jiu-jitsu, and it was something about the principles of harmony and balance. And so we loved that concept, right? And this idea of harmony and balance. And we were actually thinking about the idea of, at one point we were actually going to call it the principles of harmony and balance, right? But from a business perspective, that was going to be too hard of a name to always be dealing with. But so we ended up shortening it to Principles, and dropped the vowels just for, we were able to get the domain and all the social media and stuff like that. But so what the brand really turned into, right, and what we were trying to do with that brand was bring that kind of lifestyle component into it. It ended up not being really for kind of skate kids. It became more of a coastal millennial brand focused on high quality products. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to kind of make people start thinking about the products that they chose, why they chose those things, and how those fit into their routines, right? So brushing your teeth, putting on deodorant, using soap, etc., right? These are moments a lot of times where you're actually disconnected from your phone, you're disconnected from your computer, you're face to face with yourself in the mirror. Can these products be things that act as subtle reminders as to why you do the things you do, right? And that a lot of times it's just because the toothpaste is designed a specific way versus Crest, right? And that should trigger in your mind I made the decision to buy this, because I'm choosing out of a couple options here, right? I'm choosing a better path, and so that's how it all kind of tied back into the name Principles.
Yeah, it's the daily habits in our life certainly can govern, the principles that we follow in our life. Were you trained at the time that you were starting that company?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Almost to the detriment of the company in a way. It's hard not to. It's finding that balance and harmony is always a challenge. But yeah, I need this past year has been really, really hard on me. Because I jiu-jitsu just hasn't been a part of my routine because of the injury and surgery, and then because of COVID and the move and all that stuff. But it's something that we talked about in the whole point of this podcast, right? The things that I've learned from jiu-jitsu are things that really translate to my day-to-day, whether it's business or being a dad or being a friend, etc. And it's a major hole in my life right now.
Yeah, me too. It was a very, very hard few months not training, having that kind of stripped away in many ways. The gym is still closed. I've been doing some light training with some teammates, meeting up and just doing whatever we can. But I went from training 5 or 6 days a week in many weeks to training 2 days a week now. I'm grateful for that. Don't get me wrong, but my level and my cardio and everything, a shade of where it was when this all went down.
Yeah, so I was texting with a buddy the other day, and I was joking. I was I'm watching these videos on Instagram and YouTube, and I'm at the point now where I'm watching it, and I'm just yes, I can totally do that, right? I've forgotten how difficult training actually. We were watching this we were talking about there was a match between it was Galval versus Buchecha, and Buchecha just the way he treated Galval almost like a rag doll, and you're just what, right? And he makes it look so easy, and it's and I'm watching this, and I'm oh yeah, I can do that, right? I could do that against Andre Galval, right? Because you're kind of I'm at the point where I've forgotten how insane that is, like how insane that somebody actually can just do the things that he does. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to get back into it. Like I doubt going straight into class is the best move for me. So now I've got like all this space at my new house, and I might get some mats and just do some privates to get started to kind of just get back in shape.
Yeah.
Before I like jump into a new school.
Do you have any buddies out there that you could call over to do some training?
Yeah, actually, a guy who's become a good friend of mine. He's a black belt at AOJ. He actually used to work for me at Principles. We met through jiu-jitsu. And so the only problem is he's got like a torn ACL that he's kind of training through, but we're figuring it out.
Very, very nice. Yeah,
it's like
this whole thing is a lesson in ego and humble, and you just have to kind of get back into jiu-jitsu in the way that you get back into anything in life. You just have to go do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things too. Like I think a lot about. It's really a test of like my goal is not like my goal is to get my black belt, right? And like. It's one of my goals in jiu-jitsu is to get my black belt. But like, there is no like, and I think one of the most beautiful things about jiu-jitsu, and this translates into business as well, right? Is that there is no like prescribed path that every person takes. It isn't like you train for 2 years and you get this, and then you train for 2 years and get this, right? Everybody's on their own journey, and I think that that's something that I've learned so much from jiu-jitsu. Is like not to compare myself to others, right? And this is something that like when you're an entrepreneur, it's very, very hard when you see other companies or your friends hitting these milestones or somebody's raised all this money and you're still you can't raise that money, or they've done X amount of sales or they get acquired. And, it's like if you compare yourself to them, you're losing. Because you have no idea what they've gone through to get to that point, right? And their circumstance is totally different than yours. And so I just go back to my jiu-jitsu journey, right? And like there's sometimes like you have teammates or your buddies, and like one guy gets promoted and you don't, right? Well, like okay, that's great for him, and he did something that got him to that point. And the lesson is like, well, what are you not doing? Or like, what are you like, is like, maybe you're just obviously too early for that promotion. And so, I talk a lot about with my co-founder on this kind of stuff, right? Where on dads, where, there'll be this news of some company, doing this kind of stuff. And I'm like, hey man, we can't compare ourselves to anybody else, right? Like we just got to focus on what we're doing, right? Like this is exactly where we are.
Perfect. I mean, that was so perfectly said, and thank you for saying that, because it is exactly what I was trying to get at the heart of this discussion, and exactly what I want to write about.
Yeah.
Everyone is getting there at their own time.
Yeah.
So my wife is pregnant with our number 2, second child.
Oh wow! Congrats.
We're in contract to buy a house, and I was thinking like trying to explain to people like getting a black belt. They ask me about that all the time. Like, are you a black belt? I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not a black belt. I'm on that journey to try to get to the black belt. And they're like, as if that's some place to achieve. But as I compare it to having children and buying a house, it's like, once I get the house, that's just when it starts. Of the decades that I'm going to live in this house. It's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. Like all of the work that I'm doing to get to this point is only to begin the journey over again. And I'm enjoying it so much. I love talking about jiu-jitsu and practicing jiu-jitsu.
Dude, it's like, I think like anything, man, one thing I've learned is like, and sounds probably so cliche, but the journey is everything, right? Like once you acquire something, part of, I'm like, yes, I want to get my black belt, right? But then it's like, shit, like, thank God there's stripes and there's like coral belts and stuff, right? Because, ironically, like after we sold Cameo, it was awesome, right? Like that we did that. We had an exit, and for a little bit there was like this like honeymoon period, right? But then all of a sudden there was no grind, there was no challenge. And I was miserable, relatively miserable, right? Like, it's like I needed that. All of a sudden, there wasn't something that I was like really striving for on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And, so it's like, even with like, with it's like with dads, right? There's days that are just like, I literally am like, like, why the fuck am I doing this, right? But what I've learned, right, is that some days you're going to feel like that. And then some days you're going to be like, this is the most amazing, oh my gosh, like high-fiving and like the biggest high ever. And what I've learned from jiu-jitsu, right, is that there's days, man, where like, I'm tired. I don't want to go train, like, to be honest, right? That's just part of it. But every single time I just show up, and even if I get my ass whooped, right, it's just, I'm happy that I did it, right? Because I didn't break the link. And that's, I think, the same thing with like entrepreneurship, right? Is like, it's all about, it's not 0 to 100, right? It's not white belt to black belt. It's all the steps in between. And those are the days that like you're learning and you're growing and you're getting stronger and there's excitement, right? Like, oh my gosh, I talk about this a lot with one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu is compared to like being a business person, right? How many emails do you send? Like thousands, right? But it's rare to like really tangibly notice your improvement at being an emailer, right? Even though we do it all the time. But like in jiu-jitsu, you actually like, you hit that sweep, right? Or you sink that submission. And that feeling, right? That's like, hey, the only reason why I was able to do that is because for the past 2 weeks, I've been practicing this move, right? And so while you don't feel that in business, the lesson is like, if you don't do it, even if you fuck up, 1,000 times before you do it right, the fact that you just keep showing up and you keep doing it is the most important part.
Absolutely. And you can look for it in business. If you applied what you just described perfectly and eloquently, you can find it in business too, if you're become aware of it. You can start to apply those lessons in business by focusing on the fundamentals or learning new tasks. Like, I was never a great student, but because of jiu-jitsu, I became a much better student, and I went back to school and I started relearning courses that I had taken, accounting and statistics, post-college, and I had a newfound appreciation for the learning process, all because of jiu-jitsu.
I know, it's ironic you say that, because I literally, 5 minutes before we started talking, I signed up for like a online course on branding, right? It's like, I've never done something like that, but I was just like, why wouldn't I want to learn more? Like, why would, and especially from like, the equivalent of, the Mendez brothers in branding, right? Like, why it's available to me, like, and I can afford it, thankfully, like, why not do this? But there was a certain amount of ego, right? Like, I think, you always have to kind of overcome. And I think that, they talk a lot about jiu-jitsu, that it kills egos. And like, obviously there's a lot of ego still in jiu-jitsu gyms, whatever, but I think that what it teaches you is that, there's always room for improvement, like, you're not perfect. Like, there's, every day you're going to there's somebody out there who's got your number. And, if you really want to get to that point where you're the person that's got everybody's number in the gym, like, you got to put in the work and you got to learn and you got to have an open mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, a lot of the ego, the harder that you work and the more you get beat up. Some of the people that have bigger egos, sometimes things come natural to them, and they have just insane athleticism or youth, or they haven't been at it that long, but it really does have a way of beating most people's ego out in the gym, I found. People that have been around for a very long time, they come in, and if they stick around, it's because they've learned this martial arts philosophy, these principles that govern what happens on the mat. And those are very important principles to bring into the rest of your life too. So talk a little bit about dads. What is this awesome business that you're founding? Let me pull this out.
Yeah, sure. So it was about a year ago. I was kind of figuring out my next thing to work on, and I got connected through a mutual friend to this guy in LA named Russ, who who had spent the previous year and a half on the kind of like team behind the launch of Hello Bello, which was a line of, it's a baby care brand launched out of this incubator in LA with Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard. They launched into Walmart. And Russ, during that period, was kind of like, I'm a dad, and there's 62% of men in the United States go on to be dads, and yet here's another parenting brand focused on mom. And he had tried to get some dad initiatives through at Hello Bello, and they kept talking about it, but it never materialized. And so he was like, look, I'm going to leave and try to figure this out. And that was right around the time we got connected. He was telling, I was actually kind of in the early stages of working on a new idea, but when he started talking about this idea, it really resonated, as a dad, and then as our relationship and our kind of like complementary skill set seemed really nice. And we just were like, look, it was very informal. Like, we're just going to keep doing our stuff and help each other out. And then in early January, at the end of January, early Feb, we actually got our first like investor commitment. We're like, oh, okay, like this is real. So like, let's see if we can actually make this work. And the idea behind dads, right, is this idea that the 21st century dad is very different than the ones that we grew up with, like in the media. That Homer Simpsons and the Al Bundys, these kind of guys that, as soon as they became a dad, their life was over, and everything was reminiscing about their glory days, and they're just constantly complaining about their life sucks and all that kind of stuff. And the opposite, I think, for this generation and younger, it couldn't be more the opposite than that. It's one of these things where becoming a dad has been the most amazing thing in my life. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges in it, but man, every day, it's like I feel a sense of fulfillment that was totally missing, from my life. And that's the story we want to tell, is start highlighting that like being a dad is actually really cool, and like that it's really fun, and that it's similar to kind of like jujitsu in a way. The lessons that you learn from being a dad translate into other aspects of life and vice versa, right? And that mindset of growth and trying to continuously improve is something that is an exercise in being a father. And so we launched on Father's Day with our first product, which is the Lightning Stick, which is a better for dad. It's a functional beverage that's got nootropics and adaptogens. The idea being like, not only are we dads, but we're aging men, and drinking 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day, or drinking Red Bulls or Diet Cokes, right, is just not healthy. And could we provide an alternative to that? And so we put it together pretty quickly, especially during COVID. We got this thing launched on a very tight deadline. We're 3 months in, things are going pretty well. We're starting to figure out our kind of like what messaging is working, what channels are working, what's not working. And we're starting to kind of figure out at this point too, okay, what's next steps with, the big picture for us is really to move into, we think about our products in 2 ways. We have products that help dad feel and perform better, wellness products that help dad feel and perform better. So like the Lightning Stick being the first one of those. And then baby care products that help build stronger connections between dad and kid. So that's when we move into like diapers and wipes, baby carriers, things where there's a physical interaction, and that, creating something that's for dad. And this is a little bit tying back to this idea behind principles, right? There's the fact that like dad will have his kind of like his diapers, or there's a company that speaks to dad, enforces the bond and reminds the guy of, that, why he's doing what he's doing. Yeah. So that's, kind of the big picture, and then the kind of from like the economic side of things, the thing that we believe strongly in, and the research is starting to show, is that, men, or the dads, are starting to do more of the household shopping than they ever have. If you're a guy and you're over 24 and you're in Target, 99% chance you're a dad, right? So there's a lot of guys who are doing the Target runs, doing the Whole Foods runs, the grocery runs, doing the Amazon shopping for a variety of different reasons. Yeah. And, your choices are still Pampers, Huggies, Loves, Honest Company, etc. So we've got some pretty fun things in the works for like what our diapers and wipes are going to look like and feel like, and how they're going to be packaged, that I think will be, pretty rad. It's going to be, I don't think you've ever seen anything like this from the baby care aisle. That's for sure.
By way of coincidence, I saw an article yesterday from Dude Wipes that they are now the number 2 product at Walmart for that category. It was an article that essentially said that
wow.
the traditional market could never be disrupted. Bounty and whatever else, Scott tissue paper, and it's worth going to look for that. But what really struck me about it was how it was executed. It's such beautiful packaging. It's a great product. It tastes great. It works. You're doing all the little things right. Even the insert right here, a little beautiful thank you note. It's just like from the whole unboxing experience to the packaging to the product, you nailed it. I mean, it shows it shows people who know what they're doing.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard today, man. It's so hard to especially with consumer products. It's not like software where you can just write a few lines of code and every customer has a totally new experience. It's like the unboxing, and it's so nice to hear that. And in my mind, I'm like, wait till you see what's next, right? Because I'm I know what's coming, and but you just there's very, very little room for error these days, man. And it's so competitive out there. Everyone's fighting for the same kind of shelf space or ad placement on Facebook, and attention on social media to kind of be like, yo, hey, we're here, we exist, nice to meet you. Yeah. It's but one of those things, man. It's very nice to hear, but in my mind, I know we have so much room for improvement, right? No business launches on day one and maybe minus Instagram, right? But there's very few cases where a company launches on day one and is just hits the grand slam. It's that journey. It's that step-by-step progress that you do on a daily basis that leads to successful businesses. That Dude Wipes, I think they've been around for 7 or 8 years, right? I saw the guy post. It's an amazing story, right? He was, I forget what his LinkedIn post was, something about years ago that he was only doing this amount of traction, and now he's doing 50 crates to Walmart a month type of deal, right? And you're
and I think it also said he was laughed out of every room he went into, every investor meeting, every pitch, just laughed out. And it goes to show you, just like you got to show up.
Man. There's BJ Pins of the world that when they're 16, they go to Brazil and win the world title, as a blue belt. And then there's the dudes that, I can't think of any names, that have been grinding at it for 10 years before they actually win their champ. I use this analogy a lot. That's the Oscars, right? So a lot of actors, let's just say winning an Oscar is just the most amazing accomplishment you can get as an actor, right? And most of them, the vast majority of them, will never win that. But the ones that do, some of them win it when they're 24 years old, right? They get lucky, they get some role, and they nail it, and they get their Oscar at 24 years old. And then there's guys like the guy that Christopher Waltz that was in Inglourious Bastards. Yes. He's 50-something years old. He's been a career actor for 30-something years, right? And nobody knew who he was. And at 50-something years old, he wins his Oscar. If you're 30 years old and you haven't found success yet, and somebody told you that, hey, dude, in 25 years you're gonna get that success, it doesn't compute, right? It doesn't make sense. So I like to use that context and that reference a lot in my mind, right? And I've had a little bit of success in my life, but by no means am I retiring or am I done? But I have a lot still that I feel I need to do professionally. Yeah. And so for me, I'm just I'm still working towards that black belt professionally, right? I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and I still feel I'm somewhere around a 4-stripe blue belt or something like 3 to 4, like towards the end of my blue belt as like a business person.
I always think about that too. And I always
do you ever think of it like that? Yeah.
I always think about that. I always try to think about that analogy, and I always try to say, I wonder where I really am in my business career. I wonder where I really am in terms of what I'm doing in business. Am I a black belt? Am I a purple belt? Sometimes I feel like a white belt. Sometimes I feel like a black belt. It's obviously not a perfect analogy, but I am always trying to have that black belt mentality while keeping a beginner's mind. I mean, that's it. But I have had a lot of success in business, but just like you, still feel like I have a lifetime of learning and growing left in me. I never want to stop learning. Like, I'm going to continue to look for advanced degrees. I was just accepted into an executive MBA program, which I'm going to begin. And I hope to go for my doctorate. I hope to just constantly keep getting advanced training for as many years as I can. And as long as my body will hold up, I want to keep doing jiu-jitsu. And it's something that I really hope I could do for the rest of my life. It's actually sad to me that as I'm getting older, the thing that I love so much, I know is going to become less and less part of my life. So I'm already begun to think about other ways to stimulate those muscles. And I was like, should I take up chess now? Should I start thinking of things I can do in my mind?
Dude, you move from human chess to real chess. Now, at Clockwork, it's amazing. There's like a handful of these like guys that are 60 something years old. They're black belts. They're there every day. And I'm really grateful for them as training partners, but also from learning and seeing how they act as like these the 65-year-olds at the gym with a bunch of like 20 and 30, 40-year-olds, right? And they're just super smart. Who they train, they're very selective who they train with. They're very careful about their body. But man, you train with them and they fuck you up. Yeah. It's like they're still, these dudes have been black belts for a long time and they're really good and they're badasses and they're old, man. They're my parents' age and you train with them and just like, what the fuck, it's insane. But so for me, I'm like, I can get to that point, right? I want to be Tommy. I want to be Spen. I want to be these Shinji. I want to be these guys because I'm 37. I'm a purple belt. I'm already a year behind because of injury and COVID in my mind, right? And so for me, black belt, at the earliest at this point in my mind is like 2026, probably, right? Who knows? I don't know. I have a second kid. I'm probably not going to be training the same as I used to. So I'm looking at mid 40s as a black belt.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and I want, and I've already, I had a surgery because of jiu-jitsu. Those kind of things make you smarter about training and taking care of yourself. But I really haven't thought about what my life would be like without jiu-jitsu in the future, and I'm really trying to think about okay, how do I make sure that that's not the reality?
COVID made me think about those things. It made me consider what my life was going to be like without a lot of things that I took for granted. We started the conversation with these casual meetings and friendships, and that was something that really defined me. Being able to, I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I love going places. I haven't been on a plane since March. That's probably the first time in my whole entire life, the longest stretch of me not traveling. So I've had to look for meaning in other ways. I had put on 30 pounds in COVID. I've now taken off 22, but I'm still not back to neutral. Eight more pounds to go before I can lose another 10, but to get back to my fighting weight, that is. But so many things for granted are no longer available at this moment. Not to say they're not going to come back. I'm an optimist. I always think things will get better, of course, but it just shows you how fragile things are, and it could be taken away in a blink of an eye. And so I did start to think about, where else I can find meaning and what else I can do. And, I should have been working out. I should have been in the gym every single day. I really should have done that. I saw some of my friends use it they took advantage of quarantine. I was running my businesses and trying to keep everything afloat. Luckily I did. but no excuse. I made food and alcohol my crutch, and I was boozing every night, going home, going from my desk to the kitchen to make a martini.
I think that's okay. I think that it's like you've got a lot of stuff going on in your life. COVID was it was a crazy thing, man. It was a crazy thing, and back to that idea of can't compare yourself to others, right? It's like you're a smart dude, man. You know what you're doing. This was maybe that break that you didn't know you needed, right?
Yeah.
This was maybe the few months that there were some little things in your shoulder or your knee that gave it that time to really recover, right? And I mean, I think about my knee. I definitely started training way before I was supposed to after surgery. I was like, I'm just gonna go in and flow roll. Of course, you can't. No, I'm not gonna go. The first one, I'm just like, okay, that was 100%, right? This is not smart, but you just, and so I think that that's okay, right? Because look at, this is the most that, the saying, jiu-jitsu is always going to be there, right? I think COVID's kind of been maybe it's not, but, yes, I think it's always going to be there, right? There's going to be a gym, there's going to be a school, you'll look back at these few months, you did the things that you needed to do, you needed to put on 30 pounds because it was a way for you to tell yourself that I need jiu-jitsu back in my life, right? And I need to figure out how to get that back in my life, or I need to, maybe I should hit the gym. And I think all those things are just lessons that you take, right? And it helps you start figuring out, okay, well, like you said, in January, you probably were not thinking about, well, what else am I interested in outside of jiu-jitsu? What other kind of hobbies or things can I be learning about, right? I don't know if that thought crossed your mind, but it probably got really strong when you weren't training. And so maybe you find something new that also makes you a better person, makes your jiu-jitsu better, makes you a better dad, makes you a better business person. So it's I think all these kind of things, this is something Josh, who runs Clockwork, who's one of my closest friends, but also just a sensei on the mats and off the mats in the truest form. And, his the thing that he lives by is PMA, positive mental attitude. He's got it, everywhere. And, and it's really kind of the lifeblood of Clockwork. And it's finding the light in darkness, right? And I think it's hard because it's so easy to get hard on yourself and get down on yourself and beat yourself up. And I think it's important to kind of recognize those moments, but it's also dude, principles didn't work, right? It failed and it was really hard, but man, I learned a lot, right? I learned so much. I'm so much better. I'm so much smarter. And I think it's the same thing if you train really hard for a competition and you get fucking ankle locked in the first 5 seconds, right? That sucks. But you know what? Guarantee you're never gonna get ankle locked off the snap, ever again.
Yeah.
And I think those are it's just that, right? It's that kind of thinking about things okay, and being okay with the way things went, because there's always something positive that you can get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, this was a phenomenal conversation. It's so good catching up with you. I would love to do this again in the next couple of weeks if you'd be available, because there's more that is left unsaid, and the time is already up.
Okay, yeah, for sure. And hopefully I have a better internet connection by then.
Yeah, we'll plan for a better internet connection. That'll be helpful. But, you're just... You really have so much to share, and I appreciate you coming on here and sharing it. And I got some fantastic, some things I was just really trying to get out there recorded so that I could include it as part of this project, because it's something I'm so passionate about, and you really nailed it today. So thank you so much for being a part of this project.
No, man, I love, when you first brought that up, I love it, right? I think, and it's something, it's I don't want to go too much longer, right? But it's you try to talk your friends into doing jiu-jitsu with you, right? It's it's not karate class, right? Their mind is oh, I'm going to go up and I'm going to do karate and blah, blah, blah. I'm dude, the the like physical side of it is just like one piece of the whole puzzle. That you know, like it's like, you know, it's the community, it's the lessons, it's the exercise. You know, it like learning how to like, you know, Clockwork's not really like a self-defense style jiu-jitsu school, right? But like, you know, it's not about learning how to fight. That's like, it's like physically fight, you know, like it's about the improvement. And so I think that like putting this together on paper, like in a book, is going to be so valuable for so many people. And like, you know, I think it's just going to be, it's just such a cool thing because it's things we obviously all think about, right? And like to actually like record it and put it down is so cool.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's learning how to learn. It's appreciating constant daily grinding and improvement. I mean, that's at the heart of what it is. Listen, Mike, thank you so much. So great catching up with you. I don't, like you said, I don't know when we're going to train, but we're going to train.
Yeah,
and
thank you, man.
The next time that you find yourself back in New York, please let me know so that we can get together and
at
do
some point.